Hi, I'm Randi Kleiner, co-founder and CEO of SeriesFest, and welcome to the second annual South by Southwest Film Fest Episodic Pitch-A-Thon presented by SeriesFest. SeriesFest is a nonprofit organization that champions and empowers artists at the forefront of episodic storytelling. We provide year-round opportunities for creators and industry experts to connect, collaborate, and share stories which inspire and impact global audiences. And each June, SeriesFest culminates in a highly curated and celebrated Denver-based TV festival and marketplace. And this year will be virtual again, so hope you can join us in June. We are currently open for submissions, and in addition to our pilot and script writing competitions, we have 3 new categories, including works in progress, podcast category, and a category for short films and pilots shot entirely on your smartphone or tablet. We also have some credible year-round initiatives that we're open for submissions for, so please visit seriesfest.com for more information. And now on to our feature presentation, the Pitch-A-Thon. We have selected 5 incredible South by Southwest film and independent content creators to pitch in front of an audience, you, as well as a panel of experts. These creators will have 5 minutes to pitch their new series, and then our industry panel, including top television, new media, and digital executives, will have approximately 7 minutes to give their feedback on each project. And the winner will get a pass to this year's SeriesFest. So it's going to be very exciting. And if you stay tuned following these pitches, you will get to hear the winner. First off, a huge thank you to South by Southwest, Janet Pearson, Jody Arlington, and Austin Newart, and of course to the incredible SeriesFest team, Lauren Sloan, Claire Taylor, and Neil Trulio. Thank you all for your incredible work. Well, we all know it's hard enough to pitch in a room, and here we ask this group of creators and producers to pitch in front of a panel and audience, and it certainly takes a lot of courage and preparation. So we give our pitchers a little extra help. So please welcome a special guest, Krista Gano from Working Artists Group, who provided coaching sessions to our finalists to get them prepared for their pitch. Krista, why don't you join me? Hello.
Hi, Randi.
Thank you so much for all the work you do leading up to this event. And I'd really like to turn it over to you to hear a little bit about Working Artists Group and how you worked with these finalists to get them ready for their pitches.
Sure. So I founded Working Artists Group a while back, and the whole goal behind it was to help artists really connect to the business and understand how they can bridge the gap between being an artist and being able to share their message with the business so that people can buy what they're selling, cast them in things, all of those, I'll get that sort of that center. So we work with artists, actors, creators, and help them go from the start of their idea to how they're either going to pitch it or be in a room with different industry professionals so that they can really make sure their messages are clear.
Such an important service. Thank you. And tell us a little bit about the sessions you provided to our finalists.
So I met with the finalists, and we heard their pitches. We worked through a lot of goal sheets. That's where I come from, a more holistic approach. So what's your goal? What's your message? What's the feeling you want to leave the person with? And how can we get there? You know, so many people, they work tons on their pitch. They work a lot on the words, but they don't always work around how they're going to be portrayed or what they're going to say. And 93% of our communication is nonverbal. So to only practice the words, but not the how, can sometimes get us in the mire. So I come along and help them bring it all together so that they can really have something that they're presenting that they're proud of.
I love that. And I think it's even more true in this virtual setting, which is, you know, still newer to all of us, but you don't have that one-on-one, you know, so do you give them any specific advice for doing it on Zoom and having that presentation aspect?
We do. We talk about where their eye line should be, their lighting setup, their backgrounds if we can. We give them tips or tricks to sort of decrease their anxiety as they're going through prepping a pitch like this, and I also practice with them over and over and over again. We have to practice that pitch over and over and over again.
Well, that's fantastic. And as you said that, I thought, where is my eye line right now? So hopefully I'm looking at you all. Well, Krista, thank you so much for the work and support you do for SeriesFest all around for this particular program. It's really essential, and you can see the difference in elevation of the pitches. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Krista. And now on to the main event. But before we get to our first pitch, I would like to introduce to you our incredible panel of experts. So panel, if you could please turn on your cameras and join me. All right, thank you all. Thanks for joining us. And I'm just gonna give you a little introduction to each of our panelists and just give a wave as I introduce you. So first off, Miriam Mintz is the head of TV at Likely Story, where they are currently working on the second season of Modern Love for Amazon. Before Likely Story, she was most recently the senior director of development at JASH, working in both scripted and alternative formats. Prior to that, she held posts at IFC in both TV and digital development and at Comedy Central and in the talent department. Thank you, Miriam. David Rambo is a producer, writer, and the author of plays including The Lady with All the Answers, God's Man in Texas, and an all-new book for Lerner and Lowe's Paint Your Wagon. Following 7 seasons of the procedural CSI crime scene investigation, David has written and produced V, NYC 22, Revolution, Empire, the TNT series Will, Claws, and the Netflix drama Tiny Pretty Things. If you haven't checked that out, make sure to do so. Eric C. Smith has been a talent agent for over a decade. Eric ran the talent department at a boutique agency where he became known for identifying amazing comedic talent as well as diverse character actors. Since being a talent agent at TCA, Eric has continued the work he was known for while expanding his portfolio to include staffed writers, produced playwrights, and indie film directors. And last but certainly not least, we have David Person. David is a creative executive in original programming at IFC TV and AMC Studios at AMC Networks, where he helps curate comedy half-hour linear shows for the network in both development and current programming. Before focusing on network shows, he concurrently ran West Coast development and current programming for IFC's digital platform, The Comedy Crib, that successfully developed shows for IFC TV. And previously, David has also produced several documentary and narrative feature films. Wow, I am tongue-tied this morning, but that's all right, because we're all here. We're ready to go. We're going to see 5 fantastic pitches. And we should get on with our show. So panel, thank you. You can turn off your cameras and we can begin with our first creator to pitch. So first, give a warm welcome to Julian Zotti. Hello. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
Well, thank you so much. And here pitching Julian Zotti, The Existential Disaster.
For the first time in 45 million centuries, one species holds the future of our planet in its hands. And unfortunately, it's us. Welcome to the Institute for Existential Disaster. It's a prestigious international think tank situated in the remote Canadian Arctic. Nuclear holocausts, meteor impacts, catastrophic climate change, all the apocalyptic risks that threaten the survival of the human race, this is where the world's brightest minds predict and plan for them. Add in a 24-hour summer sun that never sets, an endless Arctic tundra, and you have the perfect setting for our half-hour workplace comedy, The Existential Disasters. It's rooted in richly eccentric characters and their ridiculous attempts to be effective from the bowels of an ineffectual think tank. We must prepare for what we can't predict. That's their motto, because there are no second chances, people. And who are these unsung heroes exactly? Well, these aren't your run-of-the-mill comic book superheroes. These are the data collectors, the bureaucrats, the scientists who selflessly work to protect the planet from the disaster that will annihilate us all. Enter our hero, Cameron Alberts, PhD. She's the queen of contingency, a freshly graduated disaster simulation expert whose one goal is to prove to everyone she's more than just a trust fund baby. She's determined to succeed on her professional merits and not her family's connections. She's a real altruist, okay? And she's here to save the world. But that's kind of hard to do from a tiny isolated office in Fort Loon. This isn't the front lines. This is the end of the line. And it's certainly not the advanced guard for saving the world that Cameron was led to believe. How in Darwin's name is a group of scientists supposed to save us by pushing paper from a research institute? Well, let's meet them. There's Freddie, the drop-dead gorgeous executive director who keeps getting dumped, but he can't figure out why. Now it's getting in the way of his job. There's Guy, the French-Canadian biotech transhumanist. His electronic body implants make the lights flicker whenever he walks into a room. Špela, the paranoid Slovenian climate scientist who believes in voluntary human extinction until she accidentally gets knocked up by a Mountie. Baron Cheever, the playboy billionaire founder and serial starfucker. His martini-fueled whims dictate the agenda. And finally, A.J. Mackenzie, whose family ancestors have been caretakers of this land for long as anyone can remember. She takes care of the office, but she ain't taking any of your shit. In our pilot, Cameron's sunny disposition creates friction with this bunch of international a-holes who don't appreciate this outsider's know-it-all attitude. So they nickname her the Camsplainer. They bicker over the Institute's new branding video directed by Michael Bay, and they can't even agree on which recycling bin to use in the lunchroom. These disaster experts can't be the last line of defense between us and certain destruction, right? Well, Cameron begins to realize just how futile this office actually is. But when the famous mentor she's traveled halfway across the world to work with at the Institute vanishes without a trace, she's thrown into a position of authority. She spends the first season overseeing one major project, the creation and role play of an alien invasion simulation requiring the whole town's participation. We'll watch as our fish out of water hero tries to convince the indigenous population in Fort Loon to LARP the War of the Worlds, given their past experience with First Contact. Cameron battles homesickness, insomnia, and a daily challenge to her hard-held ideals and values. And by season's end, she's led to the shocking discovery of what actually happened to her mentor, just as the one disaster nobody sees coming strikes Earth for real in our cliffhanger season finale. Let's face it, people, we're all living in an existential dumpster fire of our own making right now, one we predicted but didn't prepare for, come on. But that's okay, because the existential disasters is a blast laugh in the face of our current futility. It's a celebration of the human spirit and our need to soldier on and do good. It provides the same escapist pleasure of our favorite end of the world stories, but with a healthy dose of humor and distance. Comedies like The Good Place, Upload, and Moonbase 8 inspire us and make us laugh, because we believe that against the odds, a group of opposing personalities from across the world can still come together and solve the unsolvable. The underdog can still come out and save the world. Or so we hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I would now like to invite back our panel of experts. All right, we are all here. Why don't we go over to Eric?
Well, I actually really enjoyed that, to be honest. It was funny. It had a couple of things in there that made me value kind of the state of the world that we're in. You know, over the last year, you often hear about the existential crisis that we've all been experiencing. And I think one of the things when you develop material, it's important to remember the timeliness of it, especially when you take it out. And so I found that to be interesting. And I thought the Good Place and Upload are excellent kind of pieces to refer to when you look at a piece like this. I found that to be interesting. Overall, I'm interested. I have more questions to see how these characters develop, whether or not this would be, single cam. Are you looking to develop this for cable? Because that would change kind of the tone of the show, whether or not it was going to be broadcast. So, I'm definitely, my ears perked up there.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you. Julian, do you want to answer? You're definitely welcome to ask questions as well. Julian, do you want to answer his question about, kind of
fantastic.
single cam versus cable? Yeah.
Single cam, for sure. Yeah.
Great.
There's just a bit of, there's a grounded sensibility, but, we want to sort of juxtapose a show for smart people, but we're not sort of, we can still do potty humor and swearing. Like, I think
right.
Be able to sort of juxtapose the high concept and low concept, low comedy. So that's kind of what we're going for there. I'm trying to think of any other questions to answer there.
Did you have a background in science at all?
So me and my writing partner do. So my writing partner is Cassima.
Okay.
She couldn't be here today, but she was the science consultant on Orphan Black and Snowpiercer, and we met in the Snowpiercer writers' room. And she has a history in academia, working at research institutes. I mean, I'm just a good old comedy writer with a background in U.S. foreign policy, but our minds kind of and I've toured Shakespeare to the Yukon before, so she's lived up there, and I've toured up there.
Oh, wow.
So there's something about that setting that's just so fertile. There's the community there is so specific, and it's a great mine for comedy and developing relationships and having a fish out of water story based there, because a lot of these research institutes are based up there. So yeah.
Agreed. I'm slightly familiar with that, and I've also, toyed with the idea of, what must it be like to be that far away from people and kind of clustered away with these, kind of dealing with these issues that create, all kind of ridiculous antics, I'm sure, that can ensue on a television show. Yes, all those lovely things. Yeah. Excellent. Overall, I thought it was done really well.
Thank you.
Such a good question, Eric. And I think that like hearing from you about like your collaborator and sort of your experience, I think is always like useful in this type of like pitch as well, specifically with something that is so like style, like has opportunity to like use real life information. It's always useful to know there's like for any pitch really, but especially for something like this that like lives in a heightened world that most people in maybe this world specifically have no way of touching. It's super useful to know that your collaborator is a scientist herself, or like the experiences you've had in the highest parts of Canada. So I think that that's always a useful thing to articulate, because it lends credibility to something that can feel inherently and importantly ridiculous, but it gives it the grounding that's like required for the world. And I think for me, even like the question I have, especially about this idea of the world of that area is so unfamiliar to me. That would be the thing I'd be like the most curious about, is like, how does this town become a part of this world? How long has this institute been here? Like, is there a reason we're meeting them obviously we know we're meeting them today because climate change is a disaster and we're constantly worried about what's happening in the world, but is there a reason that we're meeting this institute today versus 20 years before or 20 years from now? And I think, and how that affects the town's dynamics. I think those are the kind of things that I think would like inform. Those would be the questions I'd ask if we'd have like, an hour or whatever to talk, but I think are like what like make this type of a story really like different than necessarily other Office Place things that you'd find in, wherever the office. And
if I can answer quickly, I mean, it's because of Cameron, our lead hero. That's why we're meeting this place today, and then leading up to an existential disaster that's been brewing. It's sort of her showing up and her effect on the staff and the town is sort of sets a trigger that ends up causing this existential disaster. So we're trying to do it through the eyes of this fish out of water character.
Yeah, I was actually going to piggyback off of that, like the timeliness and then the personal connection to the story is always super important, I think, especially at the top to like talk about, just so that we can sense like why you want to be telling the story and get passionate about it, so that we can get passionate about it equally and excited, because that specificity is going to be universal. And like, I really am fascinated by like different cultures, and them coming together is really a fun idea. And I think you did a great job also like having visuals to show your characters is really helpful for us to track as you're pitching. And I kind of was hoping like a little bit for more specificity of like maybe the relationships that you're tracking, just because there are so many different types of people, and like how those cultures either crash or get along, or like how they're helping the mission out with their own specific skills or from their own backgrounds. And like that would have helped me like I think sink in a little bit more of a personal touch in terms of character of like, oh, we're Cameron, like what is there an like storyline that we're like following? Are you tracking all of this stuff throughout your series? Is it episodic? And then like my other thing was, I was wondering like when the leader goes missing, like is that a storyline that we are also tracking in the series of like what happened to that leader, and And was there a resolution with that?
Yes, to all those things. She disappears, and we see the dynamics of how they're going to work together and how ineffectual they are because of the search and rescue mission. They go out and try and find her, and they never find her, but she does show up at the end of the first season. So we do answer that question. In terms of the different cultures, for sure, that's going to play out. I recognize we have a lot of characters, but that does play out through, throughout the season and the series. And we want to make sure that, we have the sort of the B plot is, Cameron's goal to create this disaster simulation for alien invasions, because that is a real thing that's happened. And so it's just carrying out, being able to sort of figure out how she's going to do that, and then what are the fallouts from that in the town when she does it in the town. But also just the philosophies of different people, Spela, who, believes that humans should just die off, and then that changes when she gets pregnant. But I think her philosophy, which is kind of a bit of a nihilistic point of view, rubs off on Cameron, who's this altruist who believes, no, I'm here to actually affect change, and that's what this institute is about. And so more so, also cultures, but the different philosophies of what these scientists feel and believe that they're actually doing are going to conflict with Cameron, and they're going to affect each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Before we run out of,
sorry, David. I was just gonna say, like, this like format of pitching in 2 seconds is so like unusual, and again, you did such a great job like jamming in all that information in like 7 minutes, because like, and to everybody, like, normally we have like at least an hour-long conversation about these shows,
and we'll talk about all ourselves and our experiences. Definitely, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, before we run out of time here, I wanted to give David Rambo a chance to add anything.
Sure. Julian, bravo for doing a 20-minute pitch in 5 minutes. I'll tell you what stayed with me, if that's helpful. What stayed with me was the first image of the setting, the little town in the mountains. That has stayed with me through everything everybody said. And I really like you talk about your background at the beginning, because I would have loved that, and would have put a little more context with me.
Sure.
Practical thing, when you go back to talking about Cameron, hold her photo up again, so we have a visual sense of which, because we've just seen a parade of characters. Let us know who this person, because I was thinking, is that the blonde or is that the first? It took me a moment to remember who Cameron was. I would love, even though people always want more, but if you would take us into the pilot. Who do we meet first? How does the pilot open? Who is the character that introduces us to this world? That would help me a lot go on the journey. If it is Cameron, just say, first day in the office, kaboom, and now I'm with her. I know what's going on. But I thought it was really, I'd love to watch this. And your comps, Eric, you're right. He picked great comps. Good place. And that was very good job.
Great. That's actually very, very helpful. And there is a pilot script, so very easily you can read it and find all those answers out, David.
All right.
You have a script already. Never tell them you already have a script. Make them pay for it.
That's right.
There's quality advice
David.
for everyone watching right there. Thank you. That's a perfect note to end this first pitch. Julian, thank you.
Thank you
Panel,
so much.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, we're on to our second pitch for a new series, Middling. So please welcome Andrew Pilkington and Laurel Sager.
Hi.
Hello. All right. Here you go.
Here we are. Middling. Okay. So imagine being a medium. All right. Now imagine being a female comedian. All right. Then imagine being a disabled comedian. All right. Oh, at that point in my work of practice, middling the live action half-hour single camera comedy similar to Flashing Home and Show.
Middling follows Sharon, an aspiring comedian and wheelchair user, as she goes through life, experiencing bizarre and at times humorous situations of discrimination. Along the way, she is surrounded by a collective of oddballs who make her seem ordinary by comparison. She regularly moonlights at the Funny Bone, a local comedy club where she eventually gets discovered by a famous comedian. So our supporting characters are Charlotte. She's Sharon's snobby best friend who shares many similarities to Rose Byrne from Bridesmaids. She's always kind of bragging about her bougie LA lifestyle. Then there's Helga. Helga is Sharon's quirky personal helper who hails from Scandinavia. She's always trying to broaden Sharon's palate with every type of meat in the animal kingdom. Then there's Bobby Rollins. He's the owner of the Funny Bone and a retired stand-up lounge lizard whose off-colored humor drives the woke population of LA up the wall. Lastly, we have Carlos. He's the attractive meter maid who Sharon reluctantly goes on dates with after her lifetime of romantic futility.
Yeah, Sharon is afraid to do her disability to her family. She gets free to for every dinner. She shows up to a baseball game on the wrong day, but she gets them anyway. Plus, wherever she goes, she gets another ending supply of thought and prayer. You know, being a disabled person in public is like being a famous person. Everyone wants to say hi to you and wave at you. That's all. We want this show to normalize disability. Our goal is to put stereotypes of how people with disabilities not being able to participate in society.
There are 56 million Americans and 1.2 billion people around the world living with a disability. When it comes to television, there often are glaring errors when covering the disability community.
The population is completely underrepresented on screen. And this show aims to fill that gap and tell authentic disability stories of what it means to be with a disability. Moving will help show a woman trying to be confident and successful. Often shows focus solely on mechanical disability. Our show doesn't do that.
Sharon's just a woman in her 30s trying to figure out what to do with her life, who also happens to be a wheelchair user.
If you don't think she has what it to make you in the LA comedy scene, well then you might as well go fuck yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew and Laurel, and please welcome back our panel of experts.
Hey, I'll jump in. Andrew, I'm still laughing from your last "Go fuck yourself." The first, I think it's great that you open this being so in your face by telling the listeners, you know, you may as well go fuck yourself, and then at the end you bring it back, and what I love about it is that it's courageous. It's, you know, how we're always taught not to start a pitch. It's a big swing, courageous, in your face move, and I love it because it also says it's okay to laugh. And that's really good. I think Sharon's going to be an amazing character, and I would certainly love to see this. I had a few thoughts, and one of them is that I get the characters in the world that you're creating. I'm not sure I'm getting the stories. we all know that it's really tough to make it as a comedian and then as a female comedian and to add a disability to it. We know that's tough. I'd love a few examples or a sense of, we'll do an episode where Sharon boppity bop and maybe another one where Helga and Sharon boppity bop. I'd love to know that. I'd also like to know if Sharon is the only disabled person we're encountering in this world. Does she have friends? Is there a community? How does she interact with other disabled people? And I would love to know what the balance is that you're going to get between the home life and the comedy club life. For better or for worse, people are going to be mentally comparing to Seinfeld. And I don't think it would hurt to say, like Seinfeld will be mostly in the apartment or mostly here, mostly there. It's not going to hurt that at all. Bravo to you. And it was great, the idea to tag team the two of you. I thought it was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll go next. It's a good, it's an interesting point because I am curious, like how much stand-up we'll get to see, like what, how we see Sharon's voice represented throughout the story, what type, where is she? I think even in the pitch, it would be great to know where she is in her, as you said, David, like in her journey of the career, right? Has she, obviously we're watching her progression of success. So has she sort of reached, has she gotten an agent? Whatever those sort of terrible industry steps of success that we see, like, has she gotten a spot somewhere? Is she trying to get into a better club? And so sort of knowing where we see her within the big, like what stage she is in her career, I think will also help articulate those stories, right? So we sort of know the touch points in her journey, but knowing sort of how stand-up's represented in this, I think is fun. And also, I think it's hard to make shows about comedy. So finding what how you use stand-up or how you use it in a fun cinematic way will also, I think, could differentiate this show, right? So if her performances articulate something different or new than the rest of her experience. But I thought it was like saying fuck you definitely articulates a sense of humor of the show. And I think that's important because it's hard to say something's funny without sort of articulating what that sense of humor is. And I think it was really well executed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with all their points. Oh,
yeah.
Eric, you want to take it?
Go, David.
I was just going to say, I totally agree that, the underrepresentation of people with disabilities is criminally unseen. Yeah, we need to see more of these stories. And I think this is such a great example of the stories I'd want to watch and, the voices that we need to be hearing right now and seeing as well. I grew up with someone who has a disability, and I always was fascinated with how their disability affected other people and how we all learn from each other. And not to say that this has to be one of those shows of after school special moments, every time, but I'd love to to David and Miriam's point, I think, what's super special about this idea is how, whether the comedy world or, the lessons that they've learned along their lives, how it might, affect change in the lives of others. Or if you're not going for that, I kind of wanted to see a little bit, maybe more outside of the comedy space and see how their lives are going on a daily basis. And, maybe where was, all the experiences in their lives mining, where were they mining that comedy, to then, regurgitate their, experiences on stage in the comedy world. Because I think, in comedy, it's such a great platform for us to talk about issues in our lives and how we really feel. And I kind of wanted to hear more about that, especially in terms of a tonal reference. And maybe, the last pitch, with, Julian mentioned a couple comps, I think those are helpful. I think visual aids are also helpful too, just to kind of get a sense of the flavor, the visuals, you know, the aesthetic of the show as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I totally agree with all that. I'll let Eric go. Eric, yeah. I
Eric,
don't think that,
oh.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
excuse me. One, I loved your log line. I think, like, you know, David said earlier, sold on the line, right? And it's super important. Now that I'm stuck on the line, the next thing I wanted to know was, you know, where's the heart of the story, right? I get the comedy, I get the social commentary, right? But I wanted to hear and kind of get the feeling of why I care so much about lead, right? Like, what is it about her that draws me to her, wants me to follow her on this journey, right? To everything that she goes into and all the things that she experiences. Why am I attached to her? And I think I think Miriam also touched on this as well, is like, what's the vehicle for, you know, for the episodes? How are we getting into them? Like, how do we incorporate them? I think, you know, there's a show that Netflix has, like Bonding, where, you know, it's a little show where the comedian pulls all his references from his BDSM friend, right? And so it ends with the comedy, and you see what happens in between, right? And I'm just kind of looking to find out where the vehicle was for the story. But overall, like, just the idea in and of itself, I'm interested in.
Thank you. That was perfectly on time. So I appreciate that. You just hit that 7 minutes right there. So that was perfect. Thank you, panel of experts. And we will head to our third pitch. Please welcome Kayla Yumi Lewis with Parked in America.
Hi.
Hi. All right.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Kayla Yumi Lewis, the writer and showrunner of Parked in America. And I'm zooming in from my childhood bedroom where I've been spending the last few months of the pandemic, given it's been, you know, not that long since I moved out. But being here for so many months has made me think a lot about my adolescence and who I used to be when I lived in this room full time. And so now I invite you all to do the same and to put yourself in your teenage mindset. So imagine yourself, age 16, with all your insecurities, angst, confusion, everything. And think of your family at the time, your close friends. And I want you to imagine your 16-year-old self waking up in an entirely different country, separated from everyone you love after a tragedy strikes your family. How unsteady would you feel going to school the next day in a brand new place? This is exactly what our heroine, Jamie Park, goes through in my half-hour YA drama series, Parked in America. Think the half of it meets normal people in terms of tone. At the top of the season, Jamie moves in with her aunt, uncle, and cousins in Illinois after her older sister attempts to take her own life back home in South Korea. Jamie is 16, she's headstrong, she's stubborn almost to a fault, but she has so much love to give in her very understated way. And though she is so strong, her sister's suicide attempt rocks Jamie completely, consuming her with guilt, rage, grief, and isolation as her family deals with the situation across the world. Not to mention, she has to adapt to a new culture in an American Catholic high school in the Midwest. So much so that she has to, she feels compelled to change her name from Jian to Jamie for the convenience of the people around her at school. So when Jamie arrives at Illinois, she meets her cousin Eli, who's also 16. He's popular, the MVP of the cross-country team, and top of his class. But under his squeaky clean exterior, he's questioning everything, his sexuality and his biracial Korean identity. He's never Korean enough for the full Koreans in his family and never white enough for the white Americans at his school. And on top of that, Eli grapples with his feelings for his childhood friend Harvey, while also keeping up appearances with his girlfriend Lauren. Both Harvey and Lauren become fast friends with Jamie, quickly entangling her into the web of drama that is their relationships to each other. So together throughout season 1, Jamie, Eli, Harvey, and Lauren learn what it is to find themselves in this modern world where identity is everything. Jamie tries to make the most of her stint at St. Mary's High School, experiencing American life by going to football games, dances, and school band concerts, all while trying to ignore the trauma she's processing so far from home. She is encouraged to talk about her debilitating guilt, but she can't easily open up to anyone, which leads to a lot of inner turmoil for her and external conflict with her new friends who just want to help. She struggles with growing feelings for Harvey, knowing of his turbulent and secret romantic involvement with Eli. So Jamie keeps their relationship a secret, but feels guilty as she grows closer to Lauren. And Eli, on the other hand, comes to terms with his toxic masculinity, which is constantly challenged by Harvey and his nonconformist attitude. So Lauren, Eli's girlfriend, struggles with perfectionism and staying on top of school, band practice, and her strained relationship, while Harvey fights to prove to Eli that he's worth more than seemingly an illicit relationship. And all secrets are revealed at a Christmas party, and as if things couldn't get worse, Jamie's sister arrives at their doorstep. So this show is so important to me because I know that as a young Asian high schooler, I would have loved to see Asians in leading roles in the YA drama canon, and I think that we're ready to do that now. But most importantly, I poured a lot of my personal experiences into the work because, like Jamie and Eli, I know what it is to process trauma at a very young age, and I know what it's like to feel out of place in every room that you enter. And so one of my biggest inspirations for the show when writing and shooting our pilot, which is screening at this festival in the Episodic Pilot Competition, so go check it out if you have the time, was the Norwegian YA drama series called Scam. Its mass success worldwide spawned 7 international remakes. But what I loved about Scam and what I'm trying to do with Parked in America is approach issues that affect young people in an honest and nuanced way that is extremely grounded in reality. Because at the end of the day, we were all young people once, and some of us are still, especially our target audience. And so if we can touch the hearts of young people, reflect their experiences back to them, and inspire them to love deeply and with empathy, I think we'll have a very bright future ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Kayla, thank you. And please welcome back our panel. David Person, why don't you start off?
Well done, well said. I loved, how you were bringing in a little bit of a personal touch at the end. I kind of, like we said in previous pitches, I kind of would love to hear that maybe a little bit more upfront and hear how you've tied that personal experience in why you want to make this show throughout, so I can kind of have a little bit also more of a relatable feeling towards what you're conveying. But I also was curious to know, like, who is your actual target audience? Like, can you see this anywhere specifically, and why? I think I want to know, like, because there are so many different normal people, I get, we have such a, I think the shows that are tapping into, like, the young culture is so wide, be it, from Euphoria and what's the Netflix show with the taped recordings throughout. I kind of wanted to, thank you. Yes. I kind of wanted to sink my teeth in a little bit more of, like, what was maybe the takeaway, since there is a message at the end. The other thing that I was trying to grapple with was the world building that you have in this series, just because I think that would go towards the tone of your show, like what is the state of the world that these kids are dealing with, and like how is this impacting them on a deeper personal level. And I think that would also tap into the sense of identity, because I love that theme. And I wanted to know a little bit more about, like, what are those story beats that are building tension throughout your show and keeping that tension, so that we see, whether it's a love triangle story that you're really playing with, and that we can see, the connective tissue as you're overlaying the different relationships that you're muddying, or that you're interconnecting to build that tension throughout your show. Kind of wanted to get that tapestry, that feeling of, like, oh, okay, I see why the sense of identity is being grappled with at a young age through the traumas, through trying to figure out, like, oneself throughout your journey with your friends, or your loved ones, or, like, I was curious to know, like, what was that sexual identity, like, storyline? What, like, where did we end? And like, does that take us to another season? But all these things like percolating in my head, you know, the curiosity that I have makes me, you know, those are the things that get me excited, you know, when watching a show.
Thank you so much. They're so helpful.
I'm happy to go next. I think, I mean, there's so much about this show that feels really exciting. And I think what's exciting about it is that, you know, Jamie, I'll just use that name, but Jamie's character feels like she's dealing with so much that's happening to her in the world, along with the realities of adolescence, that feels like there's so much of a world to mine. I think the thing that I felt like I wanted more from understanding from the pitch was, one, what was her life like before she came? What was her family like before she came? And then when she leaves to go to Illinois, you know, what are the ties? Like, what does she still talk to her parents? Is she still talking to her sister? You know, what are the, you know, how often has she come to America before this that will articulate sort of the challenges that she's entering into? Is this her first time she's ever been here, or has she visited and she has this relationship with her family there that's sort of a little bit or established, or perhaps there's like previous secrets from those previous trips that we get to mine. You know, I think that what you've set up is so enormously, it's like a real tapestry, and there's like a lot of things that I'm like, I want to uncover about, you know, what she's struggling with, language, with cultural challenges, same with relationship things, how the rules that were dictated from home, how they're different in America. And then along with that, all of this sort of like YA juiciness of romantic triangles and all those things. And I think for me, the thing I wanted to learn a little bit more about from the pitch was like those sort of like outside of the high school world things. Because then what happens at school gets like doubly impacted, because we know that she's dealing with a really enormous inner life that we're all dealing with, that we all deal with when we're, you know, 14, 15, but hers is obviously, you know, very unique in this world. So that's the thing that I think I'm like most hungry for. I'm sure is illuminated in the pilot, but I think over the course of the show, I think would be really useful to continue to look into.
Yes, thanks so much.
And I'm happy to jump in. I think, you know, for myself, I was really drawn in for a couple of reasons. You know, from my side, it was personal, right? I'm from the Midwest. I went to a Catholic high school. I understand this idea of, you know, the identity that you have and then mixed in to this world where you find yourself conflicted and trying to fit in and trying to handle your own issues. And then at the same time, I think it's really important you left us with this idea, like we were all children once, right? Like I definitely understand that it's on the inside, right? That trauma, whatever we dealt with, we all still kind of go through it over and over and over again. However, when you set the idea up, the world is so big. I just wanted to kind of come in and understand it a little bit more. What are the parents like? How do they react to each other? Do they appreciate each other? What are those conflicts like inside the home? You know, there's so many questions to be had just because it's, you know, you end up asking the questions of yourself. Like, how would I have acted in these situations? I was just looking for a little bit more of that. But I mean, that's the reason why I would watch the show, to see how those questions are answered. So, nice work.
Great, thank you.
Kayla, I'm still watching this show. I've already decided, but I want to know more about the pitch. I love the characters, and again, I think what everybody's touching on, and we've heard it in a couple of the pitches, is creating great characters and we know that they're going to go into these wonderful places and tell story, but we need a couple of examples of story. You mentioned something about Jamie's acting out, you know, her bad choices, things like that. Just give a few. You know, there's an episode where Jamie feels X because of Y, so she does Z. And that's just, I don't need a whole episode pitch, but just a little sense of how this behavior in this world. I'll tell you right now, I think Harvey is your runaway character. He's got, so it's Harvey, right? Yeah, because he's the one he's a great character. I think he's your heartthrob. I think anytime we use suicide as an inciting event, we need to give it its due and not let it just be a device. So I would like to know just a little bit about, after a lifetime of battling depression or feel, whatever, her sister attempted suicide. I just need to know that that's not a story device, that it's a real thing. And then when you bring her sister in at the end, oh my God, I'm not missing season 2. I'm hooked. So really well done. I really am watching this show.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Kayla. Okay, now please give a warm welcome to Matt Kirsch and Julie Lake, here to pitch their series, Dale's House. Hi, Matt and Julie.
Hello.
All right, I'll let you take it from here.
Dale's House is a half-hour horror comedy about two estranged best friends in their mid-30s, Ben and Nilly, both at rock bottom in their careers and personal lives, who end up house-sitting together in a demonic house that grants them all the success they desire in exchange for their eternal souls.
Like its sunny Los Angeles setting, this cursed house feeds on greed and jealousy. Its sway is alluring and nearly impossible to resist. Can Ben and Nilly see beyond their basest desires and escape before it's too late? Or, on the other hand, what good is a soul if you feel like you wasted your life anyway?
This show is super personal to us because, like tons of mid-30-somethings, we have felt the deep terror of failure, which living in LA makes so much worse because here, the perception of success, even if it's total bullshit, is so vital to your identity.
But don't get us wrong, this isn't a downer. It's about two people reuniting when they need each other most. About how failing next to someone you love hurts just a little bit less. Just like we found each other and we're like, hey, we should write a show about overcoming the terror of fucking up, and someone should be named Dale because Dale's a funny name.
Dale's House is all about the collision of tones without skimping on either one. The horror is creepy and supernatural. Think Hereditary and The Conjuring. Less special effects fuckery and more mind fuckery.
And the comedy is grounded, character-based, because that's what friends do when they're scared. They try to make each other laugh to drown out the terror. Think Search Party or The Flight Attendant.
Speaking of our characters, in the pilot, I play Nilly. She is boisterous, blunt, and super pregnant. And I was 8 months pregnant when we shot this. So Nilly was close to finishing grad school when she dropped out to marry a French guy and fuck off to Europe, which caused a major falling out with her bestie, Ben. Anyway, her husband turned out to be a creep, so now she's back in LA trying to figure out how to be a mom and put her life back together again.
And I played Ben in the pilot. He's a cerebral gay writer, which was really a stretch for me, but I kind of made it work. His debut novel was actually a pretty big hit, but he's had writer's block since his falling out with Nilly. His book money's gone, and his publisher is suing him because he hasn't turned in pages for a second book.
There's also Dana, who says she's the kooky neighbor that does some odd jobs for Dale. But as the season progresses, we learn that she's a member of a cult that protects the demon of the house.
Not to mention there's a creepy person in a unicorn mask stalking around Dale's house, and their identity and motives will be unraveled in our first season.
And then there's the house itself, which, spoiler alert, is actually a demon that feeds on flesh and souls. The fucker can really get inside your head, kill your best intentions and your best friend. As the season progresses, we learn about its demonic history and the dangerous bargain you strike when entering. When chosen by the house, all your deepest desires start coming true: financial, artistic, carnal, but at a terrifying cost.
Now, our pilot, which you can watch at the festival, opens with a weird-ass coincidence. Nilly and Ben, who haven't spoken in 3 years because of their big falling out, they both independently answered a seemingly random house-sitting ad. When they meet, Nilly's all like,
did you set this up to apologize or something? And Ben's all,
nope, but interesting you'd say that. As they settle in, it becomes clear that something's very off about this house.
The owner, Dale, is MIA. There's some organic liquid leaking from the vents. Someone calls the landline threatening to kill us. There's a landline to begin with. And holy shit, there's a unicorn in the backyard. But they're broke and have nowhere else to go, so they can't leave.
Our first 8-ish episode season pits Nilly against this house demon, but also pits them against each other. As the house starts giving Ben tons of success, like a movie deal for his book with Harry Styles attached, and tons of hot dudes start hitting him up on Grindr. Hey, cutie, got any kinks? Possession?
Until the mojo jumps to Nilly, and she gets tons of success. Like her life coaching business blows up, even though she has trouble keeping her clients alive because the house keeps eating them. But the more success they get, the more jealous they get of each other and the more empty they feel inside.
In the end, Nilly and Ben can't escape the demon of the house until they realize that their messy, codependent friendship is actually so much more valuable than the superficial appearance of success. Only together can they finally succeed at failing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I love this show. I think it's really funny and I think like the world, I think we as a culture like love the sort of dynamic of building horror and comedy together in a space, and how that the roller coaster of scares is like the joy of a horror film. And I think like being able to laugh at it is like super useful. I think candidly, I'm familiar with this. I don't want to be coy. I'm familiar with this world, but I had a question because there are obviously new things about it, and the introducing a pregnant person or a baby into this space is like sort of a classic horror trope, right? And I think like for me, I'm like curious how that plays out for your character, Julie, and like what that means is like a person not only struggling with a career, but struggling with motherhood and struggling with like that sort of dynamic, or what kind of found family looks like, especially once you're bringing somebody into the world, and how that can continue to fuck up their journey in some way, as well as like the realities of having a child in a horror house feels like particularly scary. So I think that would be something that I'd love to, hear more about, or, in a longer form pitch, that would be like a lot of fun sort of plot points to see as well.
Should I answer that now, or?
You can answer a little bit. Yeah.
Short answer. Well, having just had a baby, they come out so pure. Like they just love you and they don't judge you and they're present, right? And you realize how fucked up we've all gotten over the years by like giving a shit what everybody else thinks and trying to succeed and being so caught up in bullshit that doesn't matter. So part of it is he's this pure soul that comes out and kind of sees that this house is evil. He sees things clearly and is trying to warn his mom to get the hell out of there. And there's another sort of arc with Nilly that she has a narcissistic mother. And the more success she gets, the more she starts becoming her mother. So she has to kind of heal her wound and protect her child from the house. And that's what really propels her to fight the demon.
I laughed out loud a couple of times. Nowhere did I laugh harder than when that unicorn head came on. That was a really brilliant visual. And I think if, God forbid, you're still pitching this when the pandemic is over and you're sitting in someone's office, you have to keep that concealed and then actually in the office put a unicorn head on. It was brilliant.
Yes.
Early on, and I think it was in Matt's part of the dialogue, you use a metaphor or a simile for LA, like, just like LA, something. I actually think you can bring that throughout, because later on you said there's a thing where desires come true, but at a cost. I mean, that really is what the whole coming to LA experience is about. Your dreams can come true, but you're going to pay a hell of a price for it. Mm-hmm. So I thought that might be nice to bring back. And also thought it's the first time I've heard the term 8-ish for a series or episode order, and I thought that was kind of brilliant. Just practically speaking, Matt's background is so tasteful and warm, and like, I just want to live in Matt's room for a while. And Julie, you're against black. I think you need to compete, or be a little more complimentary to
Matt's.
Matt
Okay.
if you're on Zoom, just visually speaking.
Okay.
Because I kept checking out his paintings every now and then, or whatever's on the wall behind him. And I want to follow you guys. You're great.
You might not want to see what I have in my house.
Eric,
And I'll,
follow that up?
yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things David mentioned that I really appreciate about this particular pitch is the energy between the two pitchers, right? Like, I think when you have two people pitching, sometimes it can be distracting, but they worked in tandem so well that them bouncing back and forth, almost completing each other's sentences. I mean, go back 2 years ago and this was happening inside a room, this probably would have been killer. So, congratulations to you two, because clearly you guys are on the same wavelength, which I really appreciate. And honestly, this is funny. I think my biggest question is, when you created the show, did you see an end to it?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily see an end. I mean, eventually, but yeah, we definitely see it continuing multiple seasons. We thought, well, one kind of cool thing that kind of comes up in the first season is Ben's writer's block goes away and he starts kind of like writing this novel. It starts pouring out of him, but he's not sure where. And then we realize that this is actually Dale's story, because Dale is a soul trapped in the house. And so we learn about Dale's story through Ben's writing, which we kind of see through flashback. And so we thought like each season can be about a different soul that's trapped in the house. So
that's
Ben
great.
and the core characters kind of stay, but each season centers around a different, soul, with the kind of eventual series goal of battling this demon. Each soul kind of gives us a clue to kind of how to destroy this demon, which maybe we'll never destroy if the show keeps going. We don't really want to kill the demon, because that probably would be the end of the show.
Right, but at least that gives it life, which is kind of what I was looking at. It's like, well, how do you keep it interesting, right? But that does make sense. If there are several souls trapped within the house, and each season you can then tackle another particular soul and get a clue as to how do you defeat the overall demon, which is fantastic.
Yeah, you guys are hilarious. I like what you're trying to do is also sell the chemistry between you two, especially if you're wanting to play those roles. So I think, I laughed at those very grounded character moments where it was grounded in your personalities coming through the characters. So I think the more that you like infuse yourself and your own sense of humor, like the more fun we're having on our end, and wanting to like be with your characters and root for them. I think, to all their points, and Eric's like, the house, like, I'm really curious to know what that story is, and I think you should just say it, like, in the pitch. Like, don't be afraid to kind of, reveal some of the secrets, and if you want to leave some of the mystery, that's fine. But I think it also goes back to, like, why were they estranged? Like, what was their relationship before? Why are they getting together now? Like, what convinced them? Or what's the driving purpose? What's at stake for them to actually, from being estranged, now getting back together, and then on top of it in a crazy house? There's a lot of like logical questions that I'd be asking to get just even into the house with these characters to believe it. And I think there's a lot of comedy you can mine from, getting them together and then having to survive the situation. Which makes this show so fun. So, but I would definitely want to connect the dots in terms of like how that all works, and especially like how their relationship evolves. Does it get better? Do they really do they want to kill each other because the demonic house is driving them to want to kill each other? And I like that you talked about like that the horror was coming from more of a mind fuckery rather than it being about the gore. And I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about like, how does that, drive the story through, the series, and is there a crescendo that we're building towards, and is it a beginning, middle, and end type of story? So might this actually be a limited series or might it be a film? I kind of want to know, like, if it really is intended to continue to live on past the first season, like what might you envision for a second season if they survive the house and move out, or if they're staying in the house and it's a new demon, like how does that work? But all in all, really fun, really, really smart ideas. I love these kind of shows. We got to make Stand Against Evil at IFC. And that was a really fun horror comedy, and I love mashups. So like the more fun you get to have with that, the better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie and Matt. Thank you to our panel. All right, to bring us home, please welcome the team of History of Painting, Gael Moore, Quentin Darris, and Charlotte Mickelborg.
Thank you, Randy. Hi, I'm Gael. I'm the co-showrunner of History of Painting.
And I'm Quentin. I'm the other co-showrunner.
Hi, and I'm Charlotte, co-producer on the series. We all miss traveling, right? I, for one, would have loved to have been in Austin in person. Well, each episode of our History of a Painting virtual reality series takes you on a journey into a specific time and place, delving into the stories of the artists behind the iconic art that has changed our world. Now, History of a Painting ideally needs to be experienced wearing one of these. Please see the lovely Quentin in the other window. So most of us have wandered art galleries with a more knowledgeable friend or guide. But until now, that was where our experiences of many great works of art would have ended. Now, technology allows us to invite you to actually enter into the artist's world. At the beginning of our pilot episode, you find yourself standing in the Art Institute of Chicago. Before you towers the iconic painting of An Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte by Georges Seurat.
You may recognize this painting from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but actually, what do we really know about this painting? So as you stand in a virtual gallery, the walls around you dissolve and they reveal a pointillist-style 19th century Paris. You're standing on the Pont des Arts, and the story narrator reveals to you that George was in fact a loner. He was rejected by the establishment, and he was a man full of secrets. He even kept his girlfriend and his children hidden from everyone in his life.
Right, so that first episode is already made. But in another episode, we'll take you to Mexico in the 1940s, in the world of Frida Kahlo. We'll explore how she captured her emotional journey as an artist, but also as a woman and a feminist. At a time when you couldn't really defy the norms, she had the courage to be herself, which is something many of us can relate to today.
Another episode will take you back to 18th century France, where we uncover the story of Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun. Through her art, she became what we would call today the original fashion influencer, and she was one of the very first artists, way before Dali, to hone and master her brand. In sum, the curation of our episodes focuses on presenting a diverse range of artists.
We believe there's great entertainment, but also educational value in this series and potential subsequent seasons, both for the student, the museum goer, and to be honest, anyone and everyone with an interest in the arts. We'd like to partner with museums to launch location-based experiences in their venues. We also see great potential by following a distribution model like that currently being employed by the Phi Centre in Montreal with their VR2Go program, where you essentially preload the series onto VR headsets that are then available to rent either by individuals at home, schools, even charities promoting educational equity. And finally, we'd like to collaborate with a broadcaster with their own 360 or VR channel, as well as with specific 360 platforms such as Facebook-owned Oculus TV.
All right, this project gives a lot of new opportunities. For those who are new to art, it's a chance to be in the room with these original works of art at scale. And many of us can't travel to Chicago, Mexico City, or even Paris, especially now, but we can take you there. And for an art enthusiast who already know a lot about these paintings, this is the chance to dig a little deeper in the stories of those iconic masterpieces. The whole experience is interactive, so you can move around the world we've built and interact with the element and the scene and story, just like if you were here.
Our series offers a new perspective on art. For each episode, we'll work with a diverse range of contemporary creatives as episode narrators. we'll hear the stories of the artists of the past that changed our cultural world, as told by the contemporary artists of today who are shaping our cultural world today. Like British rapper Speech DeBelle, our series pilot narrator. The pandemic has revealed to us a hunger for online content, and this series seeks to address that. We chose to focus on paintings in our first season, but this IP is expandable to other forms of art such as sculpture, street art walking tours, iconic graffiti, architectural discoveries. All of these formats make so much sense in a virtual reality immersive setting. The possibilities really are limitless. Our pilot is in competition in this year's virtual cinema, so you can watch it in VR, but if you don't have a headset, we can send you a 360 link after the festival, which you can watch on your laptop or on your mobile. So that's it from us. Thank you so much for your time, and we're here to answer any questions.
I love the technology of it, and really you said something you buried it way down, and I would lead with it when you said at this time we can't really go to Paris or Mexico City, but we can take you there. Not only do you take us there, then you take us beyond, and I would absolutely lead with that. Because it's so exciting, and we know these works of art, and to get behind them and learn more about them, I mean that's red meat to me. I really love that. Just practically speaking, I never really understood if this is documentary or if I'm seeing dramatizations of artists' lives and how they created. And I would really like to know that. Partially as a buyer, if I were a buyer, I'd want to know it for production reasons. But just as a viewer, I would like to know that. But the whole idea of it, I love. The concept is almost outweighing at the moment in the balance of what we're hearing. The concept is leading me more than what I'm hearing about the artists and the paintings and where I go emotionally in this experience. So I'd like to know that. But it's just brilliant. It's Brave New World that has such people in it. Let's see more.
Thank you. Yeah, those are really, really good points. So yeah.
I'm happy to follow. I think, yeah, I totally agree. It's so exciting. I think, yeah, I want to know if it's VO over images or if it's reenactments. I want to know if we're just following this, if the painting is the launch, the inspiration, or if it's dominated by the artist's life story or sort of how those things are interwoven. And I think, it's funny because when you started, I thought that we produce Modern Love, and the thing that we talk about a lot with anthologies, and I think that this depends on sort of what your ultimate goal is. But with like the anthology of Modern Love, we talk a lot about the feeling of an episode versus sort of like the what of it, like not the title, but like how does it make you feel? And that would be the thing I'd ask about this. Like, you're straddling education and emotion with art, and sort of what is your ultimate goal with each of these stories is, and I think that that's something to just think about as I'm sure when we watch it, but also in how you pitch it, is sort of like, what's the feel, along with the feeling of looking at a piece of art, is the feeling that you get when you really care about seeing something, because that's the whole point of any medium of art that isn't just visual, but is, painting and sculpture, is how it makes you feel, and that we can all have a different experience in that. And I think that would be something that would be useful to articulate in this type of a pitch, because I think that's what will appeal to it for buyers and for distributors, that make it, a little different than sort of what we've seen in an audio experience or that type of format. But I think it's super exciting, and I can't wait to watch it.
Thanks. Can I I guess I'll just jump in, because I can address both David and Miriam, your questions, because yeah, that makes complete sense that we should have made that clearer. But the idea is that the painting always stays in front of you, and there's an animated world that sort of gets constructed and deconstructed around you that illustrates the VO, the narration. And the ambition is to get people excited about art, particularly young audiences, but also to sort of dismantle this idea that these iconic artists are on some sort of pedestal, and to show that they're people first and foremost, and that a great artist who changes the art landscape can come from anywhere, and that might be part of our audience viewership. Some culture changing artists might be amongst our viewership. So that's what we want to, inspire.
Can I be clear? You're talking.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think I might be answering what you're coming to, David, because just in answer to the question you asked, is it documentary? The answer to that is yes. It is documentary. It's narrated documentary. The emotional journey we take you on is not because we turn it into docudrama or drama, but rather because of the connection between the contemporary artist narrator and how their struggle in a way relates to the struggle of this, historic artist. And it's that sort of relationship that provides the sort of emotional pull of the piece. But it is documentary.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I love that. And I know I'm probably asking for something that may not be possible, but if in the pitch you could give just a small visual example of what it's like to go behind a painting, it would be a wow. And you'd sell it in the room.
We weren't allowed to do visuals. We snuck those in there, but yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually a video like that shows what it's like to be inside, but that will be for another time.
I believe you mentioned that the hosts were going to be different. I just wasn't exactly clear on if the hosts are different per episode or kind of how that was coming in.
Yeah, so each episode will have their own narrator because we want to essentially have contemporary artists commenting on artists. So we're curating our series in that aspect as well, ensuring that we have the right narrator paired up with each artist.
And I assume that you guys have a background in art, hence the idea of being able to curate the artist to narrate. I mean, I'm making that assumption, but I think that might be one of the things that I would have also led with, to say like, hey, we come from here, this is our background, this is what we pulled all these people, and so it is so specific to the actual show.
Yeah. I studied art history as an undergraduate, and Quentin, his mom is an art historian, so he grew up in that world.
She taught art in high school and just before, so she was teaching art to like students who were 16, 15, when you're really into art. And she was successful nonetheless, because she was finding ways to relate, to connect the fact that artists were just humans and the problems they faced are still the same now. So we got inspired by that at all.
And I don't.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, there's three of us. It's awkward, isn't it? I was just
That's right.
Sorry about that. You were saying two's awkward, three is properly awkward. So anyway, but just to say that I don't come from a history of art background, but I have a lot of experience in the immersive arts. So I've actually had immersive work in 3 South by Southwest in the last 4 years, and won several awards for my immersive work, including my most recent piece, Fly, which played in London's Saatchi Gallery and then went on to win the VR award at Reynard's Film Festival and the Lumiere Award for VR as well this year. So my experience is grounded in VR, as well as Gael also has some excellent experience in VR. But that's my role to play.
Excellent. Again, this is one of those shows, if you're into art, even if you're not into art, this is super easy to understand.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a huge fan of art. I think this is rad. I think what's interesting is that we're all kind of collectively saying the thing is like clarity about what the show is. And I would lead with like, I feel like you kind of pitched a few different types of shows, and you brought in VR, and you talked about like almost like a museum curated walkthrough of the pieces, and then you were talking about potentially doing a broadcast version of a show. I feel like you're pitching a bunch of different ideas, and I think maybe where some clarity will help is if you focus on one show idea and talk about how you can expand on that core property or asset of a show, and then you can branch out of it and be like, we see this exploding as a documentary like show, like a Chef's Table version. Because like to Eric's point, is there a host? And a lot of shows I think, succeed in terms of branding with a host that carries through, like ties all of the shows together. But that, you know, there are other shows like Chef's Table, which is in the like much more elevated, beautiful curated documentary show where every episode is about a different chef. And it doesn't require like a host to come in and kind of tee it up and bring you through it. So I kind of was wanting to know, like, so are we being guided through this painting or this era of like art, and why? And like, to everybody's points, like, what is the emotional but are also informational aspects, and how do you guide us through it? Because, you know, some shows, like, I think succeed in the infotainment area, but there is an entertaining factor behind it that keeps us engaged, because, you know, we're not in the museum, we're watching it on our TVs. And I think there's so much that you can do with it in terms of, getting that entertainment in there and making people feel like they're there, or that like they're getting excited about the art. But I would just want more clarity. And mostly I think it's about, how do you structure and format your show? Like, what is the show? What are we actually seeing in Act 1? And then Act 2, 3, 4, like, if this is maybe a streaming show, like, how do you bring us through? And just kind of not to, be a wet blanket in terms of like the realities out there, but anthology shows are a little bit trickier to sell. I think, what we're finding is, I don't know if Miriam and everybody else is experiencing this, but they're usually a little bit more expensive. I think it might be helpful to have like different artists each episode, so there's less of a commitment that people have to make. But if every episode is its own thing, it's almost like its own show. And so you're building a new show for every episode as an anthology. Just depends on like the scope and how you want to format your show. But just kind of, I would kind of keep that in mind.
And I'll just say one other thing. I think what David's talking about, and why I think it's useful specifically for your show, is because it feels like your goal is to reach people who either are young and maybe aren't as aware of art, or are, you will get an audience who watches and goes to museums and lives in that space. But it feels like your goal is to find the ones who aren't, right? The people who aren't being exposed to that. And that, I think, is the challenge of your project, is how do you appeal to the people who aren't doing that? So like, of course, like a world of Facebook, Oculus, that type of a space is like probably a little more exciting than being on PBS, because the audience is the different audience that you're looking for. So I think figuring out a way to even articulate that in the pitch of how you're approaching or trying to engage the younger audience, or how your work is going to feel different in that way, I think is useful. And all of these things are hard to do in a 5-minute span. And I think what we're speaking to is that it's exciting. And I think, and then there are in sale the challenges that make this exciting, and probably make this like one of those like really fun projects.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Gael, Quentin, Charlotte. Thank you all. One last time, I'm going to ask all of our pitchers to join us and turn on their cameras. Thank you all for putting yourselves out there to take part in this pitch-a-thon. It was a truly fantastic group of pitches. And once again, thank you to our panelists for taking the time to give incredible feedback and insight into the process. And now we're going to send off our judges to deliberate. And if you stay tuned on this recording, you'll find out who the winner is. So thank you once again, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to everybody for participating in this today. The pitches were all so entertaining and engaging and often moving. And the judges went off to deliberate to pick their favorites. It was not easy. In fact, we have a tie for favorites. And the two pitches that tied were Parked in America by Kayla Yumi Lewis, and also Dale's House from Matt Kirsch and Julie Lake. We just congratulate everyone for participating. We wish you all the best with these great pitches. There isn't one of these that isn't a show or an experience that we'd want to engage in. Thanks so much.